Hello there, and welcome to Murder Most British. I'm Zach, and over here when they say, a bit of how's your father, it's not checking to see how your father's doing.
I'm Rachel, the Brit who has to tell him about the rude phrases that we have, like how's your father?
That cracked me up so much when I was like, what does that mean? I was like, oh goodness, you guys are being rude again.
Well, we do have some weird euphemisms.
Well, today we're traveling to Wales to talk about one of the youngest killers in Welsh history, Harold Jones.
Well, this is a dark one for sure, as it involves the murders of children. So very heartbreaking.
If that's not something you're up for, we totally understand. Skip this episode if you need to, and we'll see you in the next one. Also, I'm referencing quotes and research by Neil Milkins, who wrote the books Every Mother's Nightmare and Abertillery Murders, and David Seabrook, who wrote Jack of Jumps.
Well, let's get into this one.
Well, we're jumping in the old time machine again, because in the early months of 1921, Abertillery, a coal mining town nestled in the hills of Monmouthshire in South Wales, was a community marked by routine, resilience, and close-knit bonds. Life here revolved around the collieries. Narrow, terraced streets echoed with the clatter of shift changes, chapel bells called the faithful to worship, and children played freely in the lanes under the watchful eyes of neighbors who knew one another by name. Serious crime was almost unheard of. This town was where families leaned on shared faith and the harsh discipline of mining life.
Well, on the morning of Saturday, the 5th of February 1921, 8-year-old Frida Elsie Maud Burnell left her home on Earl Street shortly after 9 a.m. Sent by her father to Mortimer's Stores, a nearby provisions shop on Somerset Street, Frida's errand was simple: to buy poultry, spice, and grit to feed the family's chickens. The shop assistant that morning was Harold Jones, a 15-year-old local boy who had left school a year earlier.
Frida was seen entering the shop at approximately 9:05 a.m., and Jones confirmed serving her poultry spice, but said he told her the grit was only available loose and that she left to ask her father whether this would do. This was the last time Frida was seen alive. When she did not return within an hour, her parents grew worried and began asking neighbors and shopkeepers, including Jones, about her whereabouts. By mid-afternoon, neighbors and family members had joined in the search of the streets and nearby fields, but no trace of the girl was found.
Well, tragically, the following morning, Frida's body was discovered just 300 yards from Mortimer's store, hidden in an alley behind the chapel near the cemetery wall, concealed inside a sack. The child had been brutally murdered. An inquest later found her cause of death was a combination of blunt force trauma to the head caused by an axe handle found in the nearby shed, and strangulation as a cord remained tightly tied around her neck, and there were signs of an attempted sexual assault. Scattered corn chaff found around her body, as well as inside the sack, matched the corn chaff strewn across the ground in the shed used to house poultry feed, to which Jones was one of the only few with access.
Absolutely horrific. That would be just that'd be any parent's nightmare.
Every person's nightmare, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you just send them off to the shop, as she's probably done 100 times.
5 minutes just away from her house.
Yeah.
Not very far.
Should be safe, should be fine. Everybody knows everybody, but something like this happens and is absolutely shocking in a small town,
Most definitely.
Well, suspicion quickly fell on Harold Jones. A friend of Jones named Levi Mayrick later told police that on the night of February 5th, around 10:20 p.m., Jones had actively dissuaded both him and his employer's son, Frank Mortimer, from accompanying him to the shed behind Mortimer's shop. Additionally, another witness reported hearing the screams of a young girl coming from the direction of the shed on the morning of Frida Burnell's disappearance. When questioned about these accounts, Jones denied having been in the shed at all on the day.
Well, despite the weight of this circumstantial evidence, key possession of the shed, corn chaff, and the bloody axe handle, and conflicting statements, Jones was initially treated by the town as a witness and even a helper. When he guided townsfolk to the discovery of Frida's body, his calm demeanour was noted, Some adults remarked on how composed he was in the face of tragedy, while others quietly observed his unusual lack of grief.
Yeah, you'd think that back in 21, a young kid like him, 15, you'd be like, this is horrific, scary. Maybe he's be shaken up a bit or something, but he's just calm, cool, collected. To me, that'd be unusual.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, everybody is different in how they handle certain situations, but at such a young age, 15, never actually, supposedly seen anything traumatic like that before, you would expect that there would be some show of shock or disbelief, and generally just terrified, really.
Yeah, I'd be scared. I'd be like, oh my gosh, like there's a killer around here that's done something so horrific to a child.
Yeah.
That'd be so scary. But in the days that followed, tensions rose as the community struggled to come to terms with the brutal murder of a child in their midst. Many found it inconceivable that Jones, known for singing in chapel choirs and helping his mother at home, could be responsible. But inconsistencies in his testimony, the discovery of bloodstains and child's hair in the back room of Mortimer's store, and the physical evidence linking him to the crime led police to arrest Jones on the 8th of February, 1921, just 3 days after Frida's murder.
Jones's arrest deeply divided Abertillery. While some staunchly defended him, many others grew uneasy with his steady composure and apparent willingness to stay close to the investigation. Rumours began to spread, and suspicion quietly but inevitably turned inward. At the committal hearing held at Abertillery Police Court, evidence was laid bare. Blood traces, the axe handle, witness statements disputing Jones's account, and the lack of any other suspects. The case was committed to a trial at the Monmouthshire Court, one of the regional courts that dealt with the most serious crimes, including murder.
Throughout the trial, Jones maintained a calm and controlled demeanor, showing no visible signs of distress, even when confronted with photographic evidence of Frida's injuries. His employer, Herbert Mortimer, provided an alibi, testifying that Jones was with him in the early morning and then delivering potatoes at 10 a.m., which Jones's family supported.
After a brief trial and over 5 hours of deliberation by the jury, Harold Jones was acquitted of the murder of Frida Burnell. The case against him, though supported by circumstantial evidence, had failed to establish guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Forensic science at the time was limited, and there has been no eyewitness to the crime. The judge directed the jury carefully, emphasising the need for certainty. When the verdict was read, the courtroom erupted. In Abertillery, church bells rang, crowds gathered in the streets. Jones returned home to cheers and handshakes. He was also given a gold pocket watch to celebrate his acquittal.
They also went out for a meal right afterwards. He got the pocket watch, and then they went out to eat. So everybody's like, yeah, you didn't do this.
Everyone believed that he didn't do it, yeah.
Yeah, they're like, no, this you could never. No. You wouldn't believe it that some 15-year-old boy is capable of something like that in a small town. And,
I think it is quite hard to believe that someone so young could be capable of such violence, and especially to a younger child. Obviously, we've learned over many years and many cases that it doesn't matter the age, I think.
Yeah, we've looked up some other ones where there's younger.
Yeah.
Different circumstances, but still young killers, unfortunately. Yeah. But yeah, he went back to work at Mortimer's stores. Children resumed playing in the streets, and the memory of Frida Burnell's murder began to slowly just kind of not fade away, but just they sunk in. The grieving process is starting to go, except for the family, of course. But everyone else just started to carry on. But the peace lasted about 3 weeks. On July 8th, 1921, days after his acquittal for Frida Burnell's murder, 15-year-old Harold Jones saw 11-year-old Florence Irene Little playing hopscotch with her sister Flossie outside their home at 10 Darren Road. Jones lured Little into his house on the pretext of asking her to perform an errand for his family. Hours later, when Florence didn't return home, her family reported her missing, sparking an urgent search. So it's like, everybody's like, here we go again. Oh my gosh, another little girl's missing. I would be absolutely shaken.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God.
not so long after, it's happening quite quick. Like, this child's been murdered and then another child's actually gone missing. Obviously, they're going to fear the worst.
Yeah, because, I mean, it just happened. They're like, oh my gosh, what if she's dead? Just like Frida.
Yeah, you're going to have all of that go through your mind.
You'd be running all over trying to find her and make sure she's all right.
Well, men formed search parties, scouring fields and alleyways, while police questioned neighbours and shopkeepers. Jones was amongst the last to see Florence alive, spotted with her near his home. Police arrived where Jones greeted them calmly, and a search was requested but reluctantly granted. In the attic, officers found Florence's body, hidden beneath a sack. Jones was arrested immediately, and the news spread throughout Abertillery with shock. A crowd initially gathered, doubting his guilt, but no bells rang, no gifts arrived. The boy who once led neighbours to Burnell's body had now been arrested for another murder.
Absolutely shocking. Crazy.
Well, luckily with this one, they found the body of Florence up. So, it's going to be hard for him to refute the fact that he is involved in this murder. Disgusting. And a similar ammo with the sack,
Yeah. Well, on September 17th, Jones confessed to luring 11-year-old Florence Little into his home, where he assaulted her and fatally injured her using a wooden object and a knife. He then concealed her body and attempted to cover up the crime by washing everything, and he had a bath. Jones also confessed to the earlier murder of Frida Burnell. According to his statement, he fatally assaulted Frida at Mortimer's stores using a blunt object and strangulation before concealing her body. He had then led neighbors to the scene hours later, feigning surprise. When pressed about the trial and acquittal, Jones only said that he had never expected to get away with it twice. That is cold, ice cold.
Yeah, I mean, why do it then? Why do it again, knowing full, thinking to yourself, there's no way I would get away with it. It's like he was testing the police, testing his ability to kill another child. Disgusting.
Yeah, he had this urge, I think. And this is where I go back to, like, so early. Psychopath.
Mm.
He's a psychopath.
Yeah, I mean, obviously back in 1920s, they didn't really have the idea of psychopaths and things as openly as today.
Yeah.
It's quite, yeah. And linking different behaviours within people.
I mean, like a small town Welsh countryside, these policemen and women, they don't think of psychopaths and people who could just commit cold-blooded murder and just be, they could put their hands out and they're just not shaken at all. They're just calm, easy going. They're like, well, it's everyday thing to do, which is horrific and scary. Good God.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the double confession was shocking to investigators. What had begun as a murder inquiry now revealed a calculated pattern. The boy who'd once stood in the dock as an innocent figure, quiet, composed and sympathetic, had orchestrated a deception that had fooled the public, the press and the court. In Abertillery, disbelief gave way to outrage. Crowds gathered not in support this time, but in anger. The same neighbours who had once praised Jones now spoke of betrayal. As one resident later told the Western Mail, quote, "It wasn't just the crime, it was the betrayal."
Well, yeah, if I was one of them townsfolk and I had supported him, I was like, oh, come on, this kid he couldn't be capable of this. And then it just comes out later that he did them both. And
yeah,
I'd say get a rope, get to the nearest tree, let's get him, and then we won't have to worry about him ever again, and we'll get our justice. I don't blame him. That would be absolutely crazy.
And I think also that they would have some type of guilt for believing him in the first case, because, they believed he was innocent, and for him to then commit a similar crime to another child, they would have felt some sort of level of guilt in order to, had they have not felt he was innocent and justice was served in that case, he wouldn't have gone on to murder another child. It's so heartbreaking.
So security measures were heightened The Jones family faced threats and harassment. Some residents demanded justice beyond the courtroom. Like I would be with them. I'd be like, get the rope. There's the tree. But police moved swiftly. With the confessions signed, Jones was charged with the murder of Florence Little. And at the time, obviously, the double jeopardy law, he wouldn't be able to be retried for Frieda Burnell. And given his age, just 15 and 11 months, he would not be tried as an adult, as a full criminal proceeding was scheduled. It was 16 and above. He was just off by a month.
We still have that sort of problem now, I mean, if a 17-year-old that is not far away from being 18, obviously they do not get tried as an adult, which I think, lower the age, 16, adult,
Well, like in America, they have special hearings and that, because if something is just so egregious and a 15-year-old goes out and murders 3 people, the judge has the discretion to review it and say, I know you're not 18, but this is so heinous that you will be tried as an adult, because if they're convicted as a youth offender, go to juvenile, they can then be let out.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's the lesser sentencing, isn't it, when they are under 18? But I think, at the end of the day, if they're committing a crime as heinous as an adult is committing the same similar crime, then they should be tried for the crime, not by their age. It shouldn't be trial by age, basically, in my view. It should just be trial by crimes.
Yeah, because I'm sorry, but a 15-year-old, they know right from wrong. If it was a 9-year-old kid, then that's a little different. They're not as developed. 15, 16,
Yeah.
You've been around on this earth long enough to know that you don't go around murdering people and all that shit.
I agree.
So, but the authorities treated the matter with urgency. A local magistrate court committed him for trial at the next available court.
Well, on November the 1st, 1921, Harold Jones appeared at the Monmouth court charged with the murder of Florence Little. With a full confession already in hand, the legal proceedings were swift. He was found guilty, but due to his age of being just 15 and 11 months at the time of the crime, he was spared the death penalty. Instead, the judge sentenced him to be detained at His Majesty's pleasure, a form of indefinite incarceration used for juveniles convicted of capital offences.
Newspaper reports from the time told readers how Jones bragged about the first murder and revealed, quote, I had only read of Scotland Yard men before. Now I'd seen them in the flesh, and I beat them. Then he added, quote, I watched Frieda's funeral. I played billiards, ate, and slept as usual. Jones described why he killed and said, quote, quickly as the lightning flashes, the demon had me in his power again. Again there was this blinding light and that dash of fire across my eyes and brain. Once more came the command to kill, and I did. That is crazy. Like the demon had me and told me to kill.
Well, it's just, he's talking about demons telling him to kill. Well, what about in the first murder of Frieda, the not alleged, but the attempt at sexual assault? I don't buy his demons told me to kill because, well, where did it come from with the whole attempted sexual assault on the first child?
I go back to, I'm always going to go back to Dexter, like the Dark Passenger.
That was a good show. I do like Dexter.
The Dark Passenger, the thing inside of him telling him to do it, that he needs to feed that urge. Maybe that's kind of what he was referring to.
Yeah. We didn't see anything in this case referring to any attempted sexual assault on the second girl, but even still, there seems to have been some type of sexual motive in the first case.
Yeah, possibly, but also I spared the gruesome details, because it's a child. Come on.
Yeah.
Like we don't need to get too deep, but it's like he just saw her, lured her in. That voice inside of him was just saying, this is it. This is another one. You got away with it before. Let's do it again. And it was just brutal, a brutal attack. And he was just like, no, I'm going to go out to eat and sleep as usual.
No empathy.
Yeah, psychopath. Super duper psychopath.
Well, soon after Harold Jones murdered Florence, his employer, Herbert Mortimer, closed the shop and moved his family from Abertillery. The community ostracised him for his false alibi in Jones's trial for Frida Burnell's murder, where he swore Jones and his son were working in the store early on February 5th, 1921, delivering potatoes around 10 a.m. and working all day. This testimony secured Jones's acquittal, allowing him to kill again. Mortimer was not pursued for committing perjury in court.
Well, yeah, I get that. If it wasn't
he should have been.
Yeah, if it wasn't for him.
He's given a false alibi.
Yeah. He should have got done for perjury because it led to the death of a young girl. I couldn't find out what the reasoning was, but they never pursued charges or anything. Yeah. So you can't, there's no account really that, unless I missed it. But yeah, that's horrible, but had to move away, which I wouldn't want to go to that store.
No, I think a lot of the public that lived in the Abertillery would have boycotted that store completely.
Yeah, I would have been one of them. Jones was initially held at Usk Prison, a small facility in Monmouthshire where he was kept under close observation. Soon, Jones was transferred to HMP Dartmoor in Devon, southwest England, a remote fortress notorious for its brutal conditions. Housed in the juvenile adult section, the young killer faced a world of iron gates and relentless discipline. Yet within a year, his cooperative demeanor caught attention. A 1922 Dartmoor medical report described him as intelligent and free of mental disturbance, though it noted his chilling discussions of sexual sadism with doctors. I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, see what I mean? This is where, I think he's
free of mental disturbance. I'm a doctor. Yeah, but he talks a lot about sexual sadism, but he's all good.
Yeah. His mental health is perfectly fine. As though that's sexual sadism is a normal thing.
That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. What the fuck is oh my God.
Well, that behaviour earned him a transfer to HMP Maidstone in Kent, a Category C facility focused on rehabilitation. There, prison reformer Alexander Patterson saw potential, briefly considering Jones for star prisoner status. Yeah, due to his model conduct. Jones worked in prison workshops, read in the library and kept a clean record, masking the sadistic impulses that drove him. By the late 1930s, he was moved to HMP Wandsworth in London, a sprawling complex for serious offenders.
Super duper psychopath behavior. I'm cool. I'm good. I'm easygoing. I don't start no trouble. I put the mask on for all to see. I am the star prisoner. I can get out.
Yeah, that's probably why he was trying to behave in jail, but
I have no mental disturbance except for that slight sexual sadism stuff I talk about to the doctors. But, other than that, I'm good. That is insane. Insane.
Different time back then, I don't think, having that on your record with your interviews with psychiatric doctors in this time and this day and age, that would not be a factor that you are not okay mentally.
Just imagine if they had caught Bundy or Dahmer, and they're just Dahmer, he converted Christianity or born again, all that. He's I'm a star prisoner, man. What are you talking about? Let me out. Yeah.
That guy should never get out.
No. He should never leave prison. But in December of 1941, after serving just under 20 years, Harold was released from HMP Wandsworth on parole against the recommendation of a psychiatrist. Well, at least there was that one psychiatrist that was I don't think so.
Yep. But he still got out.
Yeah, still got out. He was now 35 years old, with no known family support and no fixed address. He left Dartmoor under strict conditions, and his release was not widely reported. In wartime Britain, amid blackouts and bombing raids, there was little public attention given to a name that once filled headlines. After his release from prison, Harold then enlisted in the British Army. He was deployed to Libya, serving in the Western Desert Campaign during World War II. His service ended in February of 1946.
That's mad. Jail for these two horrific murders of these children, and he gets released and joins the army. That's crazy.
This is where I have this thing about this, okay? It's wartime. Nobody gives a crap. they need bodies. They need bodies for the war. You want to sign up? Cool. Go kill people in war. And that's another thing where I go back to the military. Like there's some people. I got this from Jack Reacher, the movie. There's different people who join the military. Patriotic. They want to fight for their country. A steady paycheck. They need stability, or a legal way to kill people.
Yeah.
And maybe he was a bit patriotic or whatever. But as a psychopath, I'm thinking he just wants to go kill people. I wouldn't trust him with POWs.
No, he probably just wanted to be able to kill people without having to go to jail after. Suspicion followed Jones beyond Abertillery. Historian Neil Milkins theorised that Jones was responsible for the 1946 murder of 12-year-old Muriel Drinkwater, known as the Little Red Riding Hood murder. Muriel was raped, beaten, and shot in woods in Swansea, just months after Jones left the British Army. Milkins pointed to similarities with Jones's earlier killings: young girls, sexual violence, and proximity to home.
A groundbreaking DNA test on a 73-year-old semen stain from Muriel's coat, one of the oldest crime scenes samples ever analysed, offered hope. But South Wales Police Detective Chief Inspector Mark Lewis announced in 2019 that the DNA categorically ruled out Jones as Muriel's killer. The case remains one of Wales's oldest unsolved murders.
What followed was silence. Jones effectively disappeared from public view. There were no interviews, no appearances, no published accounts. Official records were sparse. He had left Wales behind and settled under a new identity in London. To those who remembered his crimes, he just simply vanished. The boy killer who once stood in courtrooms and dominated newspaper front pages was gone. Or so it seemed.
Yeah, that just sounds crazy. He brutally murders 2 girls, goes to prison for 20 years, gets out on parole, goes off to the army to kill Nazis, comes back, and just disappears. Like nobody wants to know where he is.
Yeah.
That's insane.
That was the time, though. I think a lot of people would be able to sort of just vanish and not be tracked.
But what I think is it was because of the war. He got let out. Nobody gave a shit because it's the war's on.
Yeah.
And then he gets done with military service. It's like, hey, thank you for your service. See you later. And then you're in post-war Britain, everybody's just worried about rebuilding because it's devastated. You're on rationing for years and years and years, and he could just disappear. Nobody would care.
Yeah.
Well, old Harold, he adopted a series of aliases to obscure his past. Over the next 25 years, he lived under various names in South and West London, including addresses in Fulham, Hammersmith, and Notting Hill. Official documentation from the period is limited, but electoral registers and employment records confirm the use of multiple names, such as Harry Stevens and Harry Jones. He worked in manual trades, laboring, and warehouse duties, but always keeping a low profile.
Jones likely never returned to Wales. He avoided contact with former acquaintances and made no effort to reconnect with relatives still living in Monmouthshire. He moved frequently, sometimes staying in rented rooms, other times in lodging houses. Landlords and neighbours later recalled a quiet, solitary man who kept to himself and rarely socialised. Nothing in his outward behaviour drew attention. He lived on the surface as just another face in post-war Britain.
Well, there was a local legend around at some point that he had come back
to Wales.
Yeah, he like at some point he came back after he got out of prison and possibly the army, somewhere in there. And this is where the theory is that he went back and murdered Muriel. There's a local legend that he came back and he went to the graves of the little girls. And then he went back to the house where he used to live and then like talked to some people on that and then just left. But none of that was corroborated with any sort of evidence or anything like that. So it's take it with a pinch of salt type of thing.
Well, I do think that, it is a possibility. A lot of people that do commit crimes like this, murders and stuff, do take like souvenirs and things like that. Maybe he just wanted to go back and experience the place where he did these heinous acts. And for the life of me, I presume just to kind of get that sense of closeness to his crimes again.
Well, just like in some other cases in that, you have like the killers insert themselves into the investigation. And he did. He had showed them where Frida's body was.
Yeah.
And he was celebrated and, got off on it probably. Sick bastard. But it just goes with that whole psychopathic sort of behavior.
Yeah, definitely.
So despite the brutality of his early crimes, no further offenses were officially linked to Jones during this period. He remained outside the criminal justice system. Police had no record of interactions with him between 1941 and the early 60s. The murders of Frida Burnell and Florence Hill were long considered closed cases, and their details known only to historians, archivists, and the surviving families, of course. Jones had, by all available accounts, vanished into the sprawl of urban anonymity.
But beneath the surface, his presence left faint traces. A 1950s background check by the Metropolitan Police, unrelated to a criminal investigation, briefly surfaced his true identity before being quietly archived. A death certificate from the 1970s eventually confirmed that Harold Jones had lived in the capital under an assumed name until his final years. Though he never reoffended publicly, his legacy lingered as a footnote in criminology texts and legal debates about the treatment of juvenile killers.
In Abertillery, his name faded from conversation. The generation that had known the fear of 1921 began to pass on. For the wider public, the story of Harold Jones was forgotten. But in certain corners of London, in municipal records and whispered collections, the boy killer remained, unnoticed, unspoken, but very much alive. In London, he vanished for 3 decades as Harry Stevens or Harry Jones, a wraith in Hammersmith's gloom, had his dark urge, that dark rider inside of Harold Jones gone silent.
In February 1964, the body of 30-year-old Hannah Tailford was discovered on the foreshore of the River Thames near Hammersmith Bridge. She had been strangled, left naked, her body partially submerged in the water. Police noted that several of her teeth were missing and that there were no clothes, handbag, or other personal effects at the scene. It was a grim discovery, but not entirely unprecedented. Tailford was known to police as a sex worker, and violent deaths in that trade were not uncommon. At first, detectives believed it might be an isolated attack.
Just like when we were doing Sinclair, there was the same attitudes, the same things. This is just not uncommon that sex workers get murdered and that, and must be an isolated incident because they didn't have all the databases and computer systems and stuff to match things up or whatever. But just 6 weeks later, another woman, Gwyneth Reese, age 22, was found under eerily similar circumstances. Her body was located on the Thames foreshore near Barnes. Like Tailford, she had been strangled, stripped, and left in public place. There were no signs of robbery. This time, police acknowledged a possible pattern. An investigative team was assembled under Chief Detective Superintendent John DeRose of Scotland Yard.
By July, a third victim, Margaret McGowan, had been recovered from the Kensington area. Then a fourth, Helen Bartholomew, turned up in an alley in Brentford in April of 1964. The murders were no longer being treated as isolated events. Each victim was a young woman, each had worked in West London's sex trade, and all had been killed and left naked in accessible but deliberately chosen locations, often near water or industrial sites. Forensic tests indicated death by asphyxiation, but none showed signs of sexual assault. All were cleaned before being dumped. The press dubbed the killer Jack the Stripper.
That's just lazy. Come on. Really? Jack the Stripper?
I mean,
that's
it does fit, but it's not...
That's not very nice to the women that are
It's
a
bit
victims.
Degrading, isn't it?
Jeez. How awful. Good God. Jack the Stripper. If I would have been usually like the serial killers and that, they're very, they want a good name or, they want to have notoriety and stuff. And to be known as Jack the Stripper, like, oh God, gross. Throughout 1964 and early into 1965, killings continued. The fifth victim, Mary Fleming, was discovered in Chiswick in July. The sixth, Frances Brown, was found in Kensington in October. All bore the same signature: strangulation, nudity, and near total absence of forensic evidence. No fingerprints, no usable fibers, no signs of struggle. But by now, the panic had begun to spread. Sex workers in West London avoided the clients they didn't know. Police patrols were increased across the red light districts of Shepherd's Bush, Ladbroke, Grove, and Notting Hill.
The detectives believed that they were dealing with a careful, experienced offender. The killer appeared to understand police procedures and left no traceable evidence behind. Scotland Yard committed over 70 officers to the case, conducting hundreds of interviews and compiling extensive suspect lists. But no arrests were made. The murders appeared to follow a rhythm. Then, in early 1965, they stopped.
Yeah, usually with spree killers or killers that just go quick. They are apprehended because they leave traces, they leave evidence that, they can catch them a lot quicker. But ones that are methodical, they never leave anything behind. They're careful. Those are the nightmares, really, of trying to catch them.
Yeah, because obviously, the police do need at least one strand of evidence in order to have a place to start. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. You've got to have one spot where to start the investigation. Clearly, they didn't have that.
Yeah, so they had stopped, but the last one was on January 16th, 1965. The body of Bridie O'Hara was found behind a storage shed on the Heron Trading Estate in Acton. She had been missing for several weeks. Like the previous victims, she had been stripped and strangled, her body left in an industrial location, wiped clean of forensic traces. This made her the 7th known victim. For detectives, the Heron site triggered an alarm. Helen Bartholomew's body had also been discovered nearby 9 months earlier. The possibility of a geographic base emerged.
Well, the trading estate was searched in detail. Inside a locked storage shed, investigators found oily smears on the floor and on a nearby forklift, smears that matched residue found on O'Hara's skin. The shed had been unused by workers for weeks. Police believed the killer had been using the site to store the bodies temporarily before disposal. It was the first concrete link between a crime scene and potential operational space, but despite surveillance and renewed investigative pressure, the trail once again went cold.
They got that one piece, but it just wasn't enough, unfortunately, that one strand that they needed. But I'm just sitting here thinking of old Harold. He did manual labor jobs. This is quite weird, and he lived around the area.
Yeah, I mean, for us, but at that time, the police wouldn't have him on their radar, so...
Yeah.
But it does all seem quite suspicious.
Well, after O'Hara's death, the murders abruptly ceased. No further bodies fitting the established pattern were discovered. Public anxiety remained high, but behind closed doors, detectives began discussing a possibility they couldn't ignore. The killer had either died, been imprisoned on unrelated charges, or left the country. As Detective Chief and Superintendent DeRose later stated, there was no reason for him to stop, except death, arrest, or exile.
Well, the press coined the term Hammersmith nude murders, but the name Jack the Stripper took hold more widely, echoing the infamous Jack the Ripper case from the previous century. The comparison wasn't just on tabloid flair. The investigation shed key frustrations, multiple victims, a clear pattern, and no viable suspect. Despite a vast inquiry that interviewed over 7,000 people, including dock workers, ex-servicemen, security guards, and known offenders, the killer had remained unidentified.
In the spring of 1965, DeRose announced publicly that the case was close to being solved and the killer was likely among a short list of suspects. Behind the scenes, however, the investigation had stalled. Several men were placed under surveillance, but none were arrested. One of them, a security guard named Mungo Ireland, died by suicide shortly after being questioned. Some investigators privately believed he may have been the killer, though forensic evidence never confirmed it. That seems like an alias. Mungo Ireland.
I mean, I've never heard that name before.
Okay.
It's
What's
a very
your name?
different name.
Mungo Ireland. What? Where did you come from? Come from Ireland.
With no more murders, police resources were gradually reallocated. By late 1965, the case had gone dormant. The file remained open but inactive. Jack the Stripper had vanished without a trace, leaving behind 7 dead women, a baffled police force, and one of Britain's most enduring criminal mysteries.
Well, here's where the theory comes in. In 2005, the British writer David Seabrook published Jack of Jumps, a detailed examination of the unsolved Hammersmith nude murders, blending archival research with first-hand interviews and investigative analysis. The book presented a wide array of suspects, some publicly known, others drawn from overlooked police files. Among the dozens of names and dead ends, one figure emerged as a compelling but little-known candidate, Harold Jones.
Well, Jones was not among the original suspects considered by the Metropolitan Police in the 1960s. As we know, he lived quietly under an alias in West London and never came into direct contact with investigators. But research unearthed records showing that during the years of the nude murders, Jones resided in locations uncomfortably close to several of the crime scenes. Electoral rolls and housing records placed him in areas such as Fulham, Hammersmith, and Notting Hill, within walking distance of where several victims had either worked or been found. Interesting.
God dang.
They never checked that guy out.
Nope. They didn't probably even think of who he was.
But you would expect that they would investigate or go knocking on every single door.
But he's under an alias. He's just a new guy. They don't have records from 1921 Abertillery in Wales.
Yeah. So this old Jonesy lived close.
Mm-hmm. Lived close to a lot of the old crime scenes. But by 1964, Jones was 58 years old. At first glance, the details seemed to remove him from suspicion. Serial killers operating at that age were statistically rare. Seabrook argued that Harold Jones had never fit conventional profiles. At 15, he had murdered 2 young girls, manipulated adults, and successfully navigated a criminal trial. He had even evaded suspicion, confessed only after capture of the second killing, and then disappeared from public view for more than 20 years while he was in prison. Then he goes off to the army, and then he comes back and goes off to London. Age in this context did not rule him out. It complicated the narrative.
Well, the connection deepened when Seabrook examined the methods used in both sets of murders. He compared the 1921 murders with the 1960 murders. The Hammersmith killer also used strangulation, selected vulnerable victims, and dumped their bodies in industrial or secluded locations. Like Jones, the killer had avoided detection by withholding physical evidence, planning movements carefully, and vanishing without a trace.
There were no forensic links between Jones and the nude murders, no fingerprints, DNA, or direct witnesses, but the behavioral parallels were striking. Both crimes involved methodical control, victim selection within known geographical areas, and deliberate disposal in public or symbolic spaces. This wasn't proof, but it was a pattern. This began to build a profile not around what the killer left behind, but what he didn't.
Harold Jones brought more than just a violent history. He brought a proven ability to deceive. In 1921, he had not only committed 2 murders, but had inserted himself into the investigation of the first, leading searchers to the body and earning praise for his composure. He stood trial, maintained a plausible defence, and was acquitted by a jury for 1 murder, but then convicted of the second. That was only possible because of him practically being caught red-handed. So, his manipulation of perception had once fooled an entire town and the British legal system. It was not difficult to imagine such a person understanding how to evade suspicion again, this time in a city as anonymous and sprawling as London.
That's what I was thinking, he's just an older gentleman. He's out looking for some comfort from a lady of the night, and unassuming. They just wouldn't think that an older guy would do something like that, possibly, and that would take them by surprise, and he would be able to do what he wanted to do to fill that dark urge. That's why I think that this is a very good plausible explanation of who it might have been.
I mean, he was only 58. So, he still would have been quite physically fit for his age, doing the jobs that he had done over the years.
Yeah, laborer and all that.
Yeah.
And just being able to overpower them when they wouldn't think that he'd be able to.
Yeah.
And then he had all that knowledge, all that time to learn how to cover his tracks. Plausible.
Yeah, definitely plausible.
So beyond behavior, Seabrook examined Jones's post-release movements. After leaving Dartmoor in 1941, Jones lived under a series of aliases in West London throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s. He frequently changed addresses and avoided close social ties. While many other suspects in the Jack the Stripper case had military or security backgrounds, few had Jones's criminal history or psychological profile. Importantly, no suspect aside from Jones had previously committed or confessed to multiple murders involving strangulation, concealment, and forensic awareness.
Well, other suspects existed. The most frequently named was Mungo Island. He died by suicide in March 1965, shortly after being questioned. His death led some to believe that the case had been solved unofficially, but no physical evidence ever linked him to the crimes. Others on the suspects list included former police officers, dock workers, and known sex offenders, but all lacked the singular combination of proximity, experience, and demonstrated capacity for evasion that Jones had possessed.
Seabrook did not claim to solve the case, nor did he present definitive proof. Instead, he offered what he called a sustained circumstantial profile. In his view, the pattern of escalation and disappearance matched Jones's known behavior arc: early violence, calculated silence, then sudden reemergence. The killings began and ended without arrest or witness, and the killer, whoever he was, left behind no evidence or identity, no attempt to communicate, and no clear motive. The case ended as quickly as it began. That's where I go, he learned his lesson. Don't get involved.
Yeah, so stepping away from actually getting involved in the investigation.
Don't get involved. Don't put yourself out there. Don't become a suspect. Just go do your dark urge and
stay in the shadows.
Stay in the shadows. Clean all the evidence. That's it. And he learned from it. And he had so many years to perfect it, like thinking about it. And while he was in prison, boom, you've got a honed killer.
But yeah, obviously a lot of, being in jail as well, they mix with other murderers and they get, they learn from other murderers and criminals on their behaviours, what kept them from being caught for so long, or, so I definitely feel that he, over them years, had have learnt behaviours in order to avoid suspicion from police.
That's why I just, as I was reading through all this, it's like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It just makes sense. And the police were just off getting with these other suspects, and old unassuming 58-year-old Jones possibly
free to carry on killing all these sex workers.
Yeah. And had the police chasing their tails.
Yeah.
They, essentially, if it was him, he got away with it.
What made Seabrook's theory linger was about symmetry. A child killer who once fooled his community had reappeared decades later in a different city, hidden by a new name and an aging face. As Seabrook put it, quote, "A killer once welcomed home by his town may have returned decades later to hunt in the shadows of London."
Well, Jones's case sparked changes in juvenile justice. His 20-year sentence for 2 murders, lenient for the time, ignited debates in Parliament. A 1941 report warned, quote, "Juvenile killers pose unique risks if released too soon, especially if their psychiatrist says, 'Don't do that.'" This led to the 1948 Children Act, which tightened oversight of young offenders, requiring longer parole monitoring. Jones's early release, against the psychiatric advice, became a cautionary case for balancing rehabilitation with public safety, influencing stricter sentencing guidelines. Maybe you should have listened to that psychiatrist.
Crazy.
Come on.
In Abertillery, 2018 restoration of Frida Burnell and Florence Little's graves became a symbol of closure. "We reclaimed their memory," a local organiser said. reflecting community efforts to honour the victims rather than dwell on Jones's shadow. Funded by donations, the project healed old wounds, giving families a place to mourn. The initiative highlighted how small towns grapple with lingering trauma, separate from Jones's later obscurity.
That's really nice. That's really, really nice that even now, like it was almost 100 years later, they went back and cleaned up their graves and paid respects.
Yeah, most definitely. To have the family, and obviously being 100 years, you've got all the descendants of them being able to go to a place to mourn and remember these two young children.
Yeah. Well, the Hammersmith mystery, still unsolved, fuels modern true crime fascination. It sure piqued my interest, that's for sure. There's podcasts and documentaries that keep the case alive, exploring its unanswered questions. Advances in DNA, like those used in other 1960s cases, offer hope, but lost evidence stalls progress. The targeting of sex workers led to early advocacy for better safeguards, with London councils funding shelters by 1967. These victims deserve more, a Hammersmith pastor declared at a vigil, sparking grassroots campaigns. These efforts laid groundwork for 1970s policies prioritizing at-risk communities, a direct response to the case's spotlight on systemic neglect of marginalized women. Jones's life, tied to an unproven theory about the murders, remains a stark reminder of justice's gaps, where a killer's shadow lingers beyond the courtroom. Some killers slip through, their darkness dormant, waiting in the silence.
Well, that was the case of Harold Jones. I mean, let's take a minute to just remember those poor, tragic girls who lost their lives.
And the women that lost their lives in the 60s. And then not being able to solve them.
Yeah.
I know there's probably many detectives that have took a stab at it trying to solve it, and they've worked hard, long hours, and still can't quite get the guy that did it or name them in some way.
But hopefully, over the years, they'll be able to keep reopening and taking a fresh look at it.
Look at with the Muriel Drinkwater, they're over 70 years old at the time when they were testing DNA from it.
Yeah.
So they ain't stopping.
Fingers crossed, the crimes will not go unsolved. They will one day, no matter how long it takes, it will be solved. But anyway, thanks, guys. Please follow us. Give us a like, comment, and you can give us a 5-star rating while you're there. It helps. It helps others to find us within the whole algorithm. Find us at Murder Most British on Instagram and TikTok, and MMB Podcast on Facebook.
That'd be great. We want to hear from you. We want to hear what your theories are. Do you think that Harold Jones was the Hammersmith nude murderer, or other known name is Jack the Stripper? I think he was.
It could well be, I mean, he was very, very close to where these ladies were murdered. And, with his history.
And the Dark Passenger. Oh, yeah. I think he was still going around doing it.
No, who's to say that he never stopped?
Yeah.
Throughout his time after he left the army.
And then he died in 71. And I'm thinking the reason he stopped, he might have got sick.
Yeah.
Or he just wasn't able to do it for some reason.
And this is why the murders stopped. So, yeah, it does all point to him being a highly, what's the word? A highly...
likely suspect?
Yeah, highly likely suspect. Brain freeze.
We all get it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys.
It happens. So, well, we do have a link tree for everywhere you can follow us in the description below. So until next week, stay safe and stay curious.
Take care.